The sound of shattering glass echoed through the empty hallway just as Jungkook's trembling voice broke the silence. "You knew the truth all this time, and you still let me believe it was my fault." Jimin froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Outside the hospital window, rain hammered against the glass like thousands of tiny fists. The storm had swallowed the city whole, turning the world into a blur of silver lights and shadows. Jungkook stood at the end of the corridor, clutching a faded envelope so tightly that the paper had begun to wrinkle beneath his fingers. His chest rose and fell unevenly. His eyes, usually bright and fearless, were red from sleepless nights. And for the first time in years, Jimin looked afraid, not afraid of losing an argument, not afraid of being hated, afraid of losing Jungkook forever. The envelope slipped from Jungkook's hand, photographs scattered across the floor. Photographs Jimin had spent years trying to hide, photographs containing the truth about the night that changed everything 3 years earlier. The memories crashed into Jimin's mind like a tidal wave. Back then, they had been inseparable. Everyone around them noticed it. The way Jungkook always waited for Jimin after practice. The way Jimin automatically reached for Jungkook whenever crowds became overwhelming. The way they understood each other's silence better than most people understood words. Neither of them ever admitted how important the other had become. Maybe they didn't need to. Some feelings were too obvious to name. Then came that night, a rainy night, a terrible phone call, and a secret that buried itself between them like a wall. Jungkook never knew the full story, because Jimin never told him, because Jimin believed protecting him was worth any price, even if that price was their friendship, even if that price was his own happiness. Over the years, distance slowly grew between them. At first it was subtle, missed conversations, unanswered messages, forced smiles. Then came misunderstandings, coldness, resentment, pain. Jungkook spent years believing he had ruined everything, believing his mistake had caused someone important to suffer, believing he deserved the guilt that haunted him every night. What he never realized was that the guilt had never belonged to him. It belonged to Jimin, and Jimin carried it alone. Now the truth was finally lying exposed on the floor, impossible to hide. Impossible to deny. The photographs showed a different story than the one Jungkook had believed. A story of sacrifice, a story of lies told out of love, a story that changed everything. Jungkook's voice shook. "Why?" The single word sounded broken. Jimin stared at the photographs. Rainwater from an open window drifted inside, soaking the corners of the images. For years he had imagined this moment. For years he had rehearsed explanations. Yet now that it had arrived, every prepared sentence disappeared. Because some truths hurt no matter how gently they were spoken, Jimin lowered his head. "I thought it would protect you." Jungkook laughed, a hollow laugh, a painful laugh, the kind that came when someone's heart was already shattered. "Protect me?" His eyes filled with tears. "You watch me blame myself every day." Jimin flinched. Every word landed like a knife. Because Jungkook wasn't wrong, there had been countless moments when Jimin almost confessed. Countless nights when he stared at his phone, typing messages he never sent. Countless opportunities to tell the truth. Yet fear always stopped him. Fear that Jungkook would hate him. Fear that everything would fall apart. Fear that the truth would cause even greater pain. So he remained silent. And silence became its own betrayal. The corridor seemed smaller now, the air heavier. Neither of them could escape the weight of years pressing down on them. Jungkook bent down and picked up one final photograph. Hand trembled. The image captured the exact moment everything changed. The moment Jimin chose sacrifice. The moment Jungkook's future was protected at the expense of Jimin's own. The realization hit him with devastating force. All those years, all those misunderstandings, all that distance, built on a lie created by someone who cared too much. Jungkook felt tears sliding down his cheeks. He hated crying, always had, but tonight his emotions overwhelmed every defense he had built. Jimin noticed. And somehow that hurt more than anything, seeing Jungkook cry because of him, because of choices he made, because of secrets he kept. Jimin's own vision blurred. He tried to stop it, failed. The first tear escaped, then another, then another. Neither of them spoke. Words no longer felt large enough. The storm outside continued raging. But inside the corridor, another storm was finally ending. Years of pain, years of regret, years of unanswered questions. For the first time, everything stood exposed beneath the harsh hospital lights. No masks, no excuses, no more hiding. Jungkook stepped forward slowly. Jimin lifted his eyes, their gazes met. In that moment they saw everything, the hurt, the loneliness, the fear, the love that had survived despite it all. Neither of them were the same people they had been 3 years ago. Life had changed them. Pain had changed them. But some connections refused to disappear. even after being tested by time. Even after being broken, Jungkook wiped his eyes. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You should have trusted me." Jimin nodded, a tear rolled down his cheek. "I know." Silence followed, not an uncomfortable silence, not an angry silence, a healing one, the kind that appears after wounds are finally cleaned and exposed to the light. The rain gradually softened, the thunder faded into the distance, and for the first time in years, neither of them carried the truth alone. The burden had finally been shared. The darkness had finally been named. As tears continued falling from both their eyes, neither Jimin nor Jungkook tried to hide them anymore, because sometimes tears weren't signs of weakness. Sometimes they were proof that a heart had survived unimaginable pain. And sometimes, when all the truth was finally revealed, crying was the only honest thing left to do. The hospital corridor had grown quieter. Only the distant hum of fluorescent lights and the soft tapping of rain against the windows remained. Jimin stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the scattered photographs between them. The weight he had carried for years felt different now. It wasn't gone, but it no longer belonged to him alone. Jungkook slowly crouched down and gathered the photographs into a trembling stack. His fingers paused over one particular image, the oldest one, the most painful one. A photograph taken shortly before everything fell apart. In it, Jimin was laughing, a genuine laugh, the kind Jungkook had not seen from him in years. Something tightened painfully in Jungkook's chest. "When was the last time you were truly happy?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. Jimin looked surprised. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then a sad smile appeared on his face. "I don't remember." Jungkook's heart sank, because he knew Jimin wasn't exaggerating. The realization hurt more than any secret. While Jungkook had spent years blaming himself, Jimin had spent those same years punishing himself. Neither of them had been living, they had simply been surviving. The silence stretched between them. This time, neither of them rushed to fill it. The storm outside had nearly passed. Faint city lights shimmered through the wet glass. Jungkook suddenly remembered countless moments that had seemed meaningless before. Jimin checking on him after exhausting schedules. Jimin quietly leaving drinks outside his room when he skipped meals. Jimin disappearing whenever conversations became too personal. Jimin smiling even when his eyes looked exhausted. Back then Jungkook thought those were ordinary gestures. Now he understood. Every act had been an apology Jimin never knew how to say. Every kindness had carried hidden guilt. Every smile had hidden loneliness. Jungkook looked away, his eyes burned again. "You really thought I would hate you?" Jimin swallowed hard. "Yes." Answer came instantly, too instantly, as if he had rehearsed it for years. Jungkook stared at him. The certainty in Jimin's voice broke something inside him, because it meant Jimin had truly believed it, truly feared it for years. "You idiot." Jimin blinked. Jungkook laughed weakly through tears. "You really are an idiot." A tear slid down his cheek. "I was angry." His voice cracked. "I was hurt." Another tear followed. "But I never hated you." Jimin's eyes widened. For years those words had felt impossible. Something inside him began to crumble, the walls, the defenses, the guilt, the fear, all of it, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to hide behind. Jimin covered his eyes with one hand. A broken laugh escaped him, then another. Soon tears were falling again, not because he was sad, not because he was afraid. Because after years of carrying unbearable weight, he finally allowed himself to breathe. Jungkook stepped closer. Neither of them knew what to say. There were too many years to summarize, too much pain to untangle in a single conversation. But maybe healing didn't begin with answers. Maybe it began with staying, with choosing not to walk away. The automatic doors at the end of the corridor opened. A cold gust of air swept through. Neither of them moved. Neither wanted to be the first to leave. Jungkook glanced at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight. A new day had already begun. Strangely, it felt symbolic, as though the universe itself was quietly drawing a line between the past and the future. Jimin noticed Jungkook staring at the clock. "What are you thinking?" Jungkook smiled faintly. "That we wasted a lot of time." Jimin laughed softly, a genuine laugh, the first one in years. "Yeah." His voice was quiet. "Too much time." Jungkook looked at him carefully. For the first time in years, the tension in Jimin's shoulders seemed lighter. His eyes no longer looked trapped. The change was small, almost invisible, yet Jungkook noticed it immediately, maybe because he had always noticed everything about him. The thought caught him off guard. He quickly looked away, but not before Jimin noticed. A faint warmth appeared between them, awkward, uncertain, fragile, yet undeniably real. Outside, the clouds slowly parted. Moonlight emerged from behind the storm. Silver light spilled through the hospital windows and illuminated the corridor. The photographs glowed softly beneath it. Symbols of pain, symbols of truth, symbols of survival. Jungkook slipped the final photograph into the envelope and handed it to Jimin. You keep them. Jimin hesitated. Are you sure? Jungkook nodded. The past belongs to both of us. His eyes softened. But it doesn't have to control us anymore. Jimin looked down at the envelope, then back at Jungkook. For years he had dreamed of hearing something like that. Now that it was real, he almost couldn't believe it. His throat tightened. Thank you, Jungkook smiled. This time there was no sadness in it, only relief, only understanding, and perhaps something else neither of them was ready to name yet. The two of them slowly walked toward the elevator together, not because everything was fixed, not because all wounds had healed, but because for the first time in years, they were moving in the same direction again. And sometimes, after years of darkness, that was enough. The elevator doors opened, warm light spilled across the floor. Jimin stepped inside first, Jungkook followed. As the doors slowly closed, both of them caught their reflections in the mirrored wall. They looked exhausted, their eyes were red, their faces were stained with tears, yet somehow they looked lighter than they had in years. The elevator began its descent, and somewhere deep inside both their hearts, a small fragile hope quietly began to grow.
The elevator descended in silence. A soft mechanical hum filled the small space as the numbers above the door slowly changed 765. Neither Jimin nor Jungkook spoke, not because there was nothing left to say. There was too much. Years of misunderstandings could not disappear in a single night. Years of hurt could not be healed by a few conversations. Yet something important had changed. For the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. When the elevator reached the lobby, the doors slid open. The hospital was nearly empty. Only a few nurses moved quietly through the halls. The smell of coffee drifted from a small waiting area nearby. Outside the glass entrance, the rain had finally stopped. The city shimmered beneath thousands of reflections. Streetlights glowed on the wet pavement like scattered stars. Jungkook paused near the entrance. He stared outside. The storm was over. The strange thing was that he still felt as if something inside him was trembling, not from fear, from uncertainty. He had spent so many years living with guilt that he no longer knew who he was without it. Jimin seemed to understand, perhaps because he felt the same way. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. Jungkook glanced at him. Jimin stood with both hands buried in his coat pockets. His expression was tired but calm. The tension that had always lingered around him had softened. Jungkook nodded slowly. Yeah. For a few seconds neither moved, then Jimin suddenly laughed, a small laugh, unexpected. Jungkook raised an eyebrow. What? Jimin shook his head. It's just. He looked embarrassed. Forgot how awkward we can be. The first time that night Jungkook genuinely laughed, a real laugh, warm and familiar. The sound echoed through the nearly empty lobby. Jimin stared at him. The sight caught him off guard because he realized how much he had missed it, not the version of Jungkook everyone else saw, not the confident performer, not the star, just Jungkook, the person who laughed with his entire face. The person who always wore his emotions openly, the person Jimin had once known better than anyone. A painful warmth settled inside his chest. Jungkook noticed him staring. Quickly looked away. Nothing. Answer came too quickly. Jungkook narrowed his eyes. You were staring. I wasn't. You were. I wasn't. You absolutely were. Jimin rolled his eyes. For a brief moment, the years between them seemed to disappear. The conversation felt familiar, comfortable. Like slipping into an old jacket that still fit perfectly. Neither realized how much they needed that feeling. Eventually they stepped outside. The night air was cool, fresh, the scent of rain lingered everywhere. Cars passed occasionally on distant roads. The city had become quieter after midnight. For the first time in months, maybe years, neither felt rushed. Jungkook slowly walked toward a nearby bench. Jimin followed. They sat down beneath a street lamp. For several minutes they simply watched the city. No pressure. No expectations, just silence, the comfortable kind, the kind that only exists between people who understand each other. Jungkook leaned forward slightly, his elbows rested on his knees. You know what bothered me the most? Jimin looked at him. What? Jungkook stared at the wet street. I thought I wasn't important enough. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? Jungkook swallowed. The words seemed difficult. For years he had hidden them. For years he pretended they didn't exist. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt honest. When you pushed me away, his voice softened. I thought it meant losing me didn't matter. Jimin froze. The words struck harder than anything else that night because they revealed a pain he had never considered. Jungkook continued quietly. I kept wondering what I did wrong. His eyes glistened beneath the streetlight. I kept wondering why I wasn't worth trusting. Jimin looked down, his chest tightened painfully, because the truth was exactly the opposite. Jungkook mattered too much. That had always been the problem. Jimin had protected him because he mattered. He had suffered because he mattered. He had stayed silent because he mattered. Yet somehow all those choices had convinced Jungkook of the opposite. A sad smile appeared on Jimin's face. I trusted you. Jungkook looked at him. Then why didn't you tell me? Jimin took a long breath. The answer felt simple now, painfully simple. Because I was afraid. Jungkook blinked. Jimin laughed quietly. Oh, it sounds pathetic. Doesn't? Jimin shook his head. It does. He looked toward the sleeping city. For years he had hidden behind strength, behind responsibility, behind certainty, but the truth was much less impressive. The truth was that he had been scared of losing someone he cared about, scared of being misunderstood, scared of making the wrong choice, scared of facing his own mistakes. The admission felt strangely freeing. Jungkook listened carefully, no judgment, no anger, only understanding. The kind of understanding that comes from carrying your own scars. Minutes passed, then an hour, neither noticed. The conversation slowly shifted away from old wounds. They talked about forgotten memories, funny moments, embarrassing stories, the things they had missed during years of distance. Occasionally one of them laughed, occasionally silence returned. Neither felt uncomfortable anymore. The city around them continued sleeping. But something inside them had finally awakened. Hope, forgiveness. The possibility of a future that wasn't defined by the past. As dawn slowly approached, the eastern horizon began turning pale blue. The first morning light touched the tops of distant buildings. Jungkook noticed it first. We stayed up all night. Jimin followed his gaze. A smile appeared on his face. Looks like it. Sky gradually brightened. Night surrendered to morning. The darkness that had surrounded them for years felt farther away now, not gone, but farther, manageable. For the first time in a very long time, neither of them feared what came next. They simply sat together beneath the growing light, watching a new day begin. And as the sun slowly rose above the city, Jimin and Jungkook realized that sometimes healing does not arrive all at once. Sometimes it begins with a conversation, a shared silence, a forgiven mistake, and the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. That morning, neither of them walked away, and that simple choice changed everything. The sunrise painted the city in shades of gold and pale orange. For a while, Jimin and Jungkook remained seated on the bench, watching the morning unfold around them. The streets that had been empty only an hour ago slowly came to life. Delivery trucks rolled by. Cafes turned on their lights. People began stepping into a new day without knowing that, for two people sitting beneath a quiet street lamp, an entire chapter of life had just ended. Jungkook stretched his arms and leaned back. His body felt exhausted. His mind felt strangely clear. For years, he had carried questions that never seemed to have answers. Every memory had felt incomplete, every painful moment unfinished. Now the answers existed. They weren't perfect, they didn't erase the hurt, but they were real, and somehow reality felt easier to bear than uncertainty. Jimin sat quietly beside him. The dark circles beneath his eyes were impossible to ignore. Jungkook noticed them immediately. You haven't been sleeping. Jimin gave a weak smile. Neither have you. That's not an answer. Jimin laughed softly. The sound seemed lighter than before. I guess not. Jungkook studied him for a moment. There was something different about Jimin this morning, not physically, something deeper. For years Jimin had always seemed like he was carrying an invisible burden on his shoulders. Today that burden looked smaller, not gone, but smaller. Jungkook found himself smiling. Jimin caught it. What? You look less miserable. Jimin stared at him in disbelief. That's your compliment. It's honest. Terrible compliment. Jungkook laughed. The familiar teasing felt natural, comfortable, like rediscovering a language they had once spoken fluently. As they stood and began walking down the sidewalk, neither realized how much they had missed simple moments like this. No pressure, no expectations, just companionship. The morning air was cool. The scent of fresh bread drifted from a nearby bakery. Birds perched on telephone wires overhead. Everything felt ordinary. And after years of emotional chaos, ordinary felt precious. They eventually found a small cafe tucked between two buildings. The place was nearly empty. Only a few customers sat near the windows. Jimin and Jungkook settled into a corner booth. The waitress brought coffee and breakfast. For a while, neither touched their food. They simply sat there, absorbing the strange reality of being together again. Jungkook wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. The warmth seeped into his fingers. There was something else. Jimin looked up. What? Jungkook hesitated, his eyes lowered to the table. There were times when I wanted to call you. Confession came quietly, almost reluctantly. Jimin's expression softened. Jungkook continued. Sometimes I would pick up my phone. A sad smile appeared. Then I'd put it back down. Jimin felt a sharp ache in his chest because he had done exactly the same thing countless times, late at night, after difficult days, after important achievements, after painful failures. Moments when the first person he wanted to talk to had always been Jungkook. Yet fear stopped him every time. The realization made him laugh softly. What? Jungkook asked. I did the same thing. Jungkook blinked, then both of them started laughing, not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. Years of silence, years of distance, years of loneliness, all partly sustained by two stubborn people waiting for the other to make the first move. Eventually their laughter faded. A comfortable quiet settled between them. Outside the window, sunlight continued spreading across the city. The darkness of the night felt very far away now. Jungkook looked outside, then back at Jimin. His expression grew thoughtful. "Do you ever regret it?" Jimin knew exactly what he meant, the sacrifice, the silence, the years of carrying everything alone. He thought carefully before answering. For the first time he allowed himself complete honesty. "Sometimes." Jungkook listened. Jimin stared into his coffee. "I regret the pain it caused." His voice was calm. "I regret losing time." A pause. "I regret hurting you." Jungkook lowered his eyes. Jimin continued. "But I don't regret caring." The words hung in the air, simple, truthful. Jungkook felt emotion tighten in his throat again, because he understood perfectly. The hardest choices in life often came from love, not from hate, not from selfishness, from caring so much that every option felt painful. For a moment neither spoke, then Jungkook smiled. A small smile, but genuine. "I don't regret caring either." Jimin looked at him. Something warm passed between them, not a dramatic moment, not a grand declaration, something quieter, something stronger, mutual understanding. The kind built through years of shared memories, mistakes, forgiveness, and growth. The morning continued, hours passed, conversations flowed naturally. They talked about dreams they had abandoned, goals they still wanted to pursue, places they wanted to visit, books they never finished reading. Movies they pretended to understand. Little things, ordinary things, the kinds of conversations people only have when they feel safe. And perhaps that was what surprised them most. Despite everything that had happened, safety still existed between them. Trust had been damaged, but not destroyed. Connection had weakened, but never disappeared. By the time they finally left the cafe, the city was fully awake. People hurried along sidewalks. Traffic filled the streets. Life moved forward. Jimin and Jungkook stepped outside together. The sunlight felt warm against their faces. For a brief moment they stood there without speaking. The future remained uncertain. There would still be difficult conversations. There would still be scars. Healing would take time. But neither feared that anymore, because they finally understood something important. The truth had not destroyed them, the truth had freed them. And as they walked side by side through the bright morning streets, both carried a quiet certainty in their hearts. Whatever came next, they would no longer face it alone.
The sky was beginning to brighten when they finally returned from their walk. Soft shades of blue and gold stretched across the horizon, and the city slowly awakened beneath the first light of morning. Neither of them seemed eager to say goodbye. They stood outside Jimin's apartment building, hands tucked into their pockets, both pretending not to notice how long they had remained there. Jungkook glanced upward at the building. "You should sleep." Jimin raised an eyebrow. "Telling me to sleep?" "Yes." "You've been awake for almost 24 hours. Jungkook pointed at him. "And you've been awake for almost 26. Jimin laughed. Fair. For a moment neither moved. The conversation should have ended naturally, yet it didn't. Neither wanted it to. Eventually Jungkook sighed dramatically. "Fine, go upstairs." Jimin smiled. "You first." Jungkook groaned. "We're acting like children." "Little. A lot." Two of them laughed. The sound felt light, easy. Nothing like the painful conversations that had once defined every interaction between them. When they finally parted ways, both walked away carrying the same unfamiliar feeling. Peace, not complete happiness, not certainty, just peace. And after years of emotional exhaustion that felt precious over the next few weeks, something gradually changed. Neither talked about it directly, neither tried to define it. It simply happened. Messages became daily conversations became routines. Routines became something they quietly depended on. Good morning texts, late-night phone calls, random photos of meals, unimportant stories that somehow felt important because they were shared. The connection they thought had disappeared forever slowly returned, stronger, more mature, more honest. One evening, nearly a month after the truth had been revealed, Jungkook arrived at Jimin's apartment carrying a paper bag full of food. Jimin opened the door. "Why do you always bring enough food for 10 people? Jungkook walked inside. "Because you forget to eat." "I do not." "You absolutely do." Jimin opened the bag, his favorite dishes, every single one. He looked up. Jungkook pretended not to notice, but a small smile appeared on his face. Jimin felt warmth spread through his chest, the kind of warmth that came from being known, truly known, not the version people saw in public, not the version presented to the world, the real version. The one who forgot meals when stressed, the one who stayed awake too late, the one who carried worries in silence. Jungkook knew all of it. And somehow, despite everything that had happened, he still stayed. Hours later they found themselves sitting on the living room floor surrounded by empty containers and unfinished drinks. A movie played in the background, Neither was actually watching it. Jungkook lay on the carpet staring at the ceiling. Jimin sat beside the couch. The comfortable quiet between them felt natural now, then Jungkook suddenly spoke. "Can I ask you something?" Jimin looked over. "Depends, that's not encouraging." "Ask anyway." Jungkook hesitated, a rare thing. Normally he spoke without much filtering, this time seemed different. "What scared you the most?" Jimin frowned slightly. "About what back then?" Room became quieter, the movie continued playing softly in the background. Jimin thought carefully, his answer came after a long pause. "Losing you." Jungkook's expression froze, the honesty caught him off guard. Jimin continued before fear could stop him. "For years I convinced myself I was protecting you." His voice was calm, "But if I'm being completely honest," he looked down at his hands, "I was also protecting myself." Jungkook listened silently. Jimin smiled sadly. "I was terrified that if you knew everything you would walk away." Confession hung in the room, heavy, vulnerable, real. Jungkook slowly sat upright. For several seconds he said nothing, then he looked directly at Jimin. "You know what scares me?" Jimin shook his head. Jungkook's eyes softened. "Almost losing you because neither of us was brave enough to tell the truth." The words settled deeply between them. Neither looked away, neither hid behind jokes. For once there were no walls, only honesty. The evening light streaming through the windows painted soft golden patterns across the room. Dust floated through the sunlight. The movie continued playing unnoticed. Time itself seemed slower somehow. Jimin felt his heart beating harder than usual, not from anxiety, not from fear, something else, something he wasn't ready to name, perhaps because naming it would make it real. Jungkook looked away first, a faint smile appeared. "We wasted a lot of years." Jimin laughed softly. "Yeah, that's annoying." "Little." "A lot," Jimin nodded. "A lot." They both smiled, yet beneath the humor was sadness, not for what they had now, for what they had lost, the years they could never recover. The memories they never made, the moments that disappeared while they stood on opposite sides of misunderstandings. But for the first time, neither allowed regret to dominate the present. The past had already taken enough, it didn't deserve their future too. As evening slowly became night, city lights began glowing outside the windows. The apartment felt warm, safe, peaceful. Jungkook eventually stood and stretched. "I should go." Jimin nodded, but neither moved immediately. The familiar reluctance returned. That strange hesitation whenever it was time to leave. Jungkook noticed it, so did Jimin. Neither mentioned it. Some things didn't need words. When Jungkook finally reached the door, he paused. His hand rested on the handle, then he turned around. Jimin looked up. For a brief second neither spoke. Then Jungkook smiled, a genuine smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "I'm glad you're still here." Words were simple, yet they carried years of meaning. Jimin felt emotion tighten in his chest. His own smile appeared slowly. "So am I." Jungkook nodded once, then he left. The door closed softly behind him. The apartment became quiet again, yet it didn't feel lonely. As Jimin stood by the window watching the city lights below, he realized something important. The truth had not only repaired what was broken, it had given them something they never truly had before, a second chance. And for the first time in years, the future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like something worth looking forward to. Weeks passed. The rhythm of their lives settled into something neither had expected. The wounds of the past did not vanish overnight, but they no longer controlled every thought, every conversation, every silence. Little by little, life became brighter. Jimin noticed it first. Not in dramatic moments, not during emotional conversations, in ordinary things. He caught himself smiling while reading Jungkook's messages. He found himself looking forward to their late-night calls. Sometimes he would hear a funny story during the day and instinctively think, "I should tell Jungkook about this later." The realization was both comforting and terrifying, because it reminded him of a truth he had spent years trying to forget. Some people become part of your life so completely that even distance cannot remove them. One evening, Jimin was sitting alone on his balcony when his phone buzzed. A message from Jungkook appeared. "Come outside." Jimin frowned. "Outside where?" A reply arrived immediately. "Your building." Jimin stood up and walked toward the balcony railing. Below, near the entrance, Jungkook stood waving both arms dramatically. Jimin laughed. Even from several floors above, he could tell Jungkook looked pleased with himself. A few minutes later, Jimin joined him downstairs. "What are you doing here?" Jungkook grinned. "Saving you." "What? Your apartment?" Jimin blinked. "My apartment?" "Yes, why?" Jungkook pointed accusingly. "Been inside all day." Jimin opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Unfortunately, Jungkook was correct. Seeing the expression on his face, Jungkook nodded proudly. "Exactly. You are unbelievably annoying." "Heard that before, frequently. Usually from you." Despite himself, Jimin smiled. Jungkook's grin widened. "Come on, where are we going?" "No idea." Jimin stared at him. "You dragged me outside without a plan." "Yes, that's ridiculous." "I know," and somehow that answer made Jimin laugh. So they walked, no destination, no schedule, just wandering through the city beneath the evening lights. The air carried the scent of food from nearby restaurants, music drifted from open shop doors. People moved through the streets around them, living lives completely separate from their own. For a while they simply enjoyed the atmosphere, then Jungkook suddenly stopped walking. Jimin nearly walked into him. "What now?" Instead of answering, Jungkook pointed across the street. A small photography exhibit had opened inside a local gallery. Photographs filled the front windows. Jimin stared. Photography. A familiar ache stirred inside him. Years ago, before everything fell apart, he had loved taking pictures. Not professionally, just as a hobby, capturing moments, collecting memories. But after the events that changed their lives, he had quietly stopped. His camera eventually disappeared into a closet, untouched, forgotten. Jungkook noticed the expression on his face. "You miss it." Jimin looked away. "A little." Jungkook raised an eyebrow. "A little." Jimin sighed. "Fine, a lot." Without another word, Jungkook crossed the street. Jimin followed. Inside the gallery, soft music played in the background. The walls were lined with photographs, landscapes, cities, portraits, moments frozen in time. Jimin moved slowly through the exhibit. Something inside him stirred. A feeling he hadn't experienced in years, inspiration, hope, possibility. Jungkook quietly watched from a distance. He recognized that look. The same look Jimin always had whenever he truly loved something. Eventually, they stopped in front of a photograph of a sunrise over a river. The colors were stunning. Gold reflecting across still water. Jimin stared at it for a long time, then he smiled, a small smile, but real. Jungkook noticed. "You should start again." Jimin glanced at him. Jimin immediately shook his head. "It's been years, so I'm probably terrible now." Jungkook laughed. "You always say that before doing something amazing." Jimin rolled his eyes. "You exaggerate." "No." Jungkook looked directly at him. "I don't." Sincerity in his voice caught Jimin off guard. For a moment neither spoke. Then Jimin looked back at the photograph. A strange warmth spread through his chest, not because of the picture, because someone still believed in him, even after everything, especially after everything. When they left the gallery later that night, the city lights shimmered beneath a clear sky. Jimin found himself thinking about old dreams, dreams he had abandoned, dreams he had convinced himself no longer mattered. Perhaps he had been wrong. Perhaps some dreams simply waited for the right moment to return. As they walked side by side down the sidewalk, Jungkook suddenly nudged him. "What?" Jungkook smiled. "When you become a famous photographer, remember that I inspired you." Jimin laughed. "Never let me forget that, will you?" "Absolutely not." Jimin shook his head, yet his smile remained, and for the first time in years he felt excitement about something beyond survival, beyond healing, beyond the past, something connected to the future. Neither of them noticed how much that mattered. Because healing wasn't only about recovering from pain. Sometimes healing was learning how to dream again. And as they disappeared into the bright city night, talking and laughing about things that suddenly seemed possible, the future stretched out before them, not as something uncertain and frightening, but as something waiting to be lived.